Cinema Classics is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center at 1550 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. Further details and showtimes online at gatewayfilmcenter.org.
The award-winning Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to the shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm Johnny DiLoretto.
I'm John DeSando.
This is Cinema Classics.
Yes, sir, it is.
And one of the great Cinema Classics makers of Cinema Classics is Steven Spielberg, who we talked about many times on the show.
Our last two shows have been his films.
Yeah, good Lord. I keep talking about this guy.
Yeah.
But he should stop making movies not worth talking about, I guess. The BFG.
Yes.
In theaters now. Big Friendly Giant.
Yep.
Adapted from the Roald Dahl book.
Yep.
Which, you know, I read something a little while ago that I did not know. The BFG was published the same year as E.T.
Well, that's nice.
And when you start drawing the parallels there,
yeah,
you know, unlikely friendships between children and these otherworldly creatures, then you begin to see maybe Spielberg was destined to make this movie.
Yeah, you got this little girl, little brick girl, an orphan,
mm-hmm.
and she makes friends with a 24-foot giant.
Yeah.
Played brilliantly by Mark Rylance.
Yes, and we should say that as a motion-captured performance.
Yes, and I got to give a lot of credit to Steven Spielberg and working with his actors, because it's a memorable film for kids and for adults.
Yeah.
So you're saying that this fits somewhat the E.T. paradigm?
Well, you know, yeah, Spielberg's preoccupations with the innocence of childhood.
Right.
You know, kids who, you know, this is not just Spielberg, but, you know, and all of movies, think about all the children who are resilient and resourceful and spunky and, you know, fighting a system, you know what I mean? This is right up Spielberg's alley. I will say that the movie does have a number of charms, but there's also an emptiness in some of it. It seems to me Spielberg is just too good at making movies sometimes, that he can just throw these things together and whip up some whimsy, throw in a little wonderment, and, you know, like it seems just like a recipe.
Yeah, and you're probably right. When you think about the 9 very bad boy giants in BFG, there's something in there that doesn't do a whole lot for me, because I think it's easy.
Yeah.
You get these guys who are 10 times bigger even than the BFG, and they're just hamming it up like crazy.
And you know, like other filmmakers, which I would expect Spielberg to draw back from this kind of thing, but there's a lot of like over-reliance on CGI and, you know, overdoing things. I can't help it. I don't care. I'm fast becoming really disenchanted with the overuse of CGI and how really it takes me right out of a movie.
Yeah.
And for all of Mark Rylance's brilliance in this role, and Spielberg does a wonderful job, his special effects team, of capturing Rylance's vocal performance and the nuances in his facial expressions.
And his face, the close-ups of his face
I
are beautiful.
still just don't believe that kid is in the room with anything.
Okay.
I just don't.
Okay, yeah. So
in the same way, now here's a perfect example of something, is Jurassic Park. Spielberg's first foray into a lot of computer effects. That T-Rex scene, when the T-Rex is attacking the car and the kids are in, that still is a monumental achievement of special effects. It's a perfect blend of computer wizardry, but also animatronics, and you feel that there's something physically moving that car, pushing it over the precipice. I just don't feel that here.
Well, and also in BFG, we are there. Also in BFG, we are there with the giant pretty quickly. And I think in Jurassic Park, as in Jaws, Spielberg still had the sense of waiting, of suspense.
Right.
And here, if I could pick up on your comments.
Great point. I love that he kind of tries to break that formula.
Yeah.
But you're right. Within the first 15 minutes, she is whisked away out of the orphanage by this guy.
Now, what about AI?
AI is a really interesting, I think, little nexus between Spielberg and obviously Stanley Kubrick. That was a movie that Stanley Kubrick was going to direct, but he died, and Spielberg wanted to bring his vision to life. I feel for movie fans, it's a fascinating mashup, because you feel his coldness and his remoteness there. At the same time, Spielberg is trying to inject it with Haley Joel Osment, like this kid in the middle. He's trying to give it that sort of wonderful E.T. feel.
But don't you think he has, in that way, he has successfully kind of brought together both the fact that this is a robotic kid,
Yeah.
and he wants to be loved
Mm-hmm.
like a human being.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's some kind of a connection between the real and the science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not different for him, but he has plenty of aliens in Close Encounters.
Sure.
But like this one, I think you're right. There's something very unusual.
Well, you can feel like, I wonder how the kid's performance would have been directed by Kubrick. Spielberg, I think, wants us to instantly feel that this kid is every bit as human as we are. He's clearly feeling great loss and pain and longing, and I wonder how Kubrick would have orchestrated that. Probably he probably would have made it a little harder for us.
Well, don't you think? Remember the kid in with The Shining?
Yeah.
Yes,
He's
exactly.
a great character.
What about War of the Worlds, Dakota Fanning?
Yeah.
Is there any connection, do you see?
I like War of the Worlds a lot. Obviously, Tom Cruise is in it.
Yeah.
But I think he gives a great performance as a dad who's struggling to become a responsible father. I also feel like Spielberg does a better job there of commingling practical and digital effects.
Okay.
But also, too, I just feel like it comes too easy for him.
Yeah.
Like, had anybody else, I don't want to steal this idea. I read this. Somebody wrote this recently online. But if anybody else would direct one of these Spielberg films that we consider lesser Spielberg,
Mhm.
like the BFG, if somebody just kind of burst on the scene and made that movie, we'd think, oh my God, here's the great new filmmaker of our time.
Mm-hmm.
But when Spielberg makes them, they just seem like minor works.
Yeah, and I think that's why he's certainly doing as much producing as he is, and much more than directing.
Yeah.
And I think he could feel himself the repetition, the brand that he puts on it,
Yeah.
and therefore the loss of surprise
Yeah.
on our part.
Let's close with one more
Yeah.
discussion of the BFG, because I believe there's a scene in there
Okay.
that really does
This is
kind of capture
your strength. I
Spielberg's-
love this.
captures Spielberg's talents and what his real gifts are. The scene at Buckingham Palace,
Yeah.
where they invite the BFG in for tea. And
Yes, the Queen.
The Queen. And the movie finally slows down to take a breath there. And Spielberg lets the scene play out at the pace that it needs to play out at. And the characters are all great. The details, the little details, pouring coffee out of a watering can.
Yeah.
And then it all ends in that sort of beautiful orchestration of embarrassing flatulence.
Oh yes.
And the audience, you can feel it. You can feel the audience come alive in that scene. And they very nearly applaud.
Well, and that scene for me too it's so fabulous. It's so extraordinary. There's no little kid that's going to have tea with the Queen and anything like that, or a giant sitting in there. But it is the moment when the film and its unbelievability comes into believable.
Right.
You're right. There's
It is.
something he does that personalizes that.
It's because I think you feel the giant moving through the space. You feel how cramped it is for him. I believed much more in that scene that the giant was in that room than I believed that he was in his own space where he takes the kid.
Yeah.
it's really tricky business. I really think that Spielberg is struggling with computer effects. I know that sounds presumptuous and
Well,
crazy, but it's just, it seems cartoonish to me, even in the hands of a master.
well, I think because he's really a very fine. Well, I think also because he's really a very fine storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
That he's coming to terms with this Goliath of CGI
Mm-hmm.
with his storytelling, and even for a brilliant director, he's got to be able to control that to continue to tell his stories,
Yeah.
which are frequently about innocence and care.